There is a crowd gathered in the temple courts, and they are angry. You can feel it before you see it. The way a mob has its own weather, its own pressure in the air. These are not strangers. These are scribes, Pharisees, men who have memorized the law from boyhood, men who know every word God ever said about justice. And they are dragging a woman through the dust. They throw her down in front of a teacher sitting in the courtyard. Her name is not recorded. The Gospel of John gives us everything else: the time of day, the location, the accusation, but her name is lost. Or maybe it was never written down because names were not given to women like her. Not in that world, not in that moment. The men speak over her head. "Teacher," they say, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses commands us to stone her. What do you say?" It is a trap, of course. If Jesus says stone her, he loses his reputation as a man of mercy. If he says release her, he breaks Mosaic law, and they have him. Either way, they win. And Jesus does something that has confused scholars for 2,000 years. He bends down and writes in the dirt. Nobody knows what he wrote. The text doesn't say. Some theologians think he was writing the sins of the men in the crowd. Some think he was writing the names of the women those same men had used and discarded. Some think he simply needed a moment, a human moment, to collect himself before saying the words that would stop everything. Whatever he wrote, it worked. He straightens up and says quietly, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And then he bends back down. And one by one, you hear it, the heavy thud of stones being set back on the ground, the shuffle of sandals on stone as the crowd disperses. The oldest ones leave first. They have had longer to accumulate reasons to walk away. When Jesus stands again, they are alone. "Woman," he says, and here the Greek word is gyneka, which in that culture was not a cold or clinical term. It was the same word a husband used for his wife, a son for his mother. It carried warmth. It carried dignity. It was not the word you use for someone you considered less than you. "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She looks up, maybe for the first time. "No one, Lord." "Then neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." That is it. No lecture, no list of conditions, no public shaming disguised as mercy. He saw a woman that a crowd had reduced to an accusation, and he gave her back her name, even though we do not know what it was. Here's what most people miss about this story. The law that the Pharisees were quoting, Leviticus 20:10, required that both parties be brought forward, the man and the woman. But only the woman was dragged into the temple courts. The man was nowhere. Either the accusers knew where he was and chose not to bring him, or they did not care. Either way, the system that was supposed to protect her had already failed her before Jesus ever said a word. And Jesus knew that. He knew exactly what kind of injustice he was standing in the middle of. And he stood there anyway. He stopped for her. One of the other women in this story will have a conversation with Jesus that no one else in the history of the world will ever have. We will get there, but not yet. Now move 12 years back in time, or forward, depending on how you read the Gospel of Mark, to a woman who has been sick for every single one of those 12 years. 12 years of bleeding that would not stop. You need to understand what that meant in the ancient world. Under Jewish law, a woman with a persistent discharge of blood was considered ritually unclean, which meant she could not enter the temple, could not touch another person without making them unclean too, could not be held by her husband, embraced by her children, seated beside a friend at a meal. For 12 years, she had been untouchable. Not because anyone hated her. The law simply required it. The historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, described how strictly women in this condition were separated from public life. He was not exaggerating. This woman had spent 12 years on the outside of every gathering that mattered. She had also spent everything she had trying to get better. Mark tells us she had suffered greatly under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. That sentence contains a lifetime of disappointment. Every doctor, every remedy, every coin she scraped together, gone. And she was worse. Stay with me. On this particular day, there is a crowd surging around Jesus. The kind of pressing, jostling, shoulder-to-shoulder crowd that a city street produces when word gets out that the miracle worker is passing through. She is in that crowd. She has heard about him, and she has made a decision that takes more courage than it looks like from the outside. She is going to touch him. She should not. She knows she should not. According to everything she has been taught, touching anyone in her condition is a violation. But she reasons something out quietly in her own mind. If I touch even his garments, I will be made well. She reaches through the crowd. She touches the edge of his robe. And immediately, that is the word Mark uses, euthys, immediately, the bleeding stops. She feels it in her body before her mind catches up. 12 years of sickness, gone in a second. And then Jesus stops in the middle of a pressing, moving crowd with people bumping into him from every side. He stops and says, "Who touched my garments?" His disciples think this is almost a strange question. "Teacher, the crowd is pressing in on you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he knew. The Greek word used here for what left him is dynamis, power, the same root we get dynamite from. He felt it go out of him, not because he was depleted, but because something intentional had happened. Someone had reached for him in faith, and he had noticed. She comes forward, trembling, falls at his feet and tells him everything, all of it. The 12 years, the doctors, the money, the isolation, all of it spilling out in front of the whole crowd that had watched her be invisible for over a decade. And he calls her something he calls almost no one else in the Gospels. Daughter. Not woman, daughter. A family word, a belonging word. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. The Greek word translated peace. There is the Hebrew concept behind it, shalom, which does not simply mean the absence of conflict. Shalom means wholeness. Nothing missing, nothing broken, not just your body, you, all of you. She reached for the edge of a robe in a crowd where nobody was looking at her. And he turned around. He always stopped. There is another woman in this story who never even asked. The town is called Nain, a small settlement in Galilee. And Jesus is approaching the gate with his disciples when a funeral procession comes out of it. Luke chapter 7 describes it simply. A young man has died. He is the only son of a widow. In the ancient world, that combination, widow, only son dead, was not just grief. It was economic catastrophe. A widow without a son had no male protector in a legal system that required one. No inheritance rights, no advocate. She would be dependent on the charity of neighbors for the rest of her life, however long or short that turned out to be. Luke tells us one thing about Jesus in this moment that changes everything. He says, when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. The word in Greek is splanchnizo, to be moved in your gut, not sentiment, not pity from a distance. This is the word used for the father who sees his prodigal son coming down the road and runs. It is a visceral, whole body response. And then it says, he came and touched the bier, the wooden stretcher carrying the dead man, and said, young man, I say to you, arise. The young man sits up and begins to speak. And Jesus, this is the detail that breaks you, gave him to his mother. He had not been asked. No one had sent a message. No one had prayed that Jesus would be walking past that gate on that day. This woman was walking toward a future she had not chosen and could not escape. And Jesus stopped the funeral procession for her. Pay attention to this next one, because it is unlike any of the others. The woman at the well has done nothing that day to indicate she wants to be found. It is noon, the 6th hour, John tells us. And the well outside the Samaritan city of Sychar is empty because it is noon. Nobody draws water in the midday heat. Nobody except someone who does not want to be seen. She comes alone. She has had 5 husbands. The man she is living with now is not her husband. We do not know why she has had 5 husbands. Death, divorce, abandonment. The text does not tell us, and anyone who tells you they know is guessing. What we know is that she is the kind of woman that respectable society has made complicated. There is a Jewish man sitting at the well. This is already unusual. Jews and Samaritans had despised each other for centuries. A racial, religious, and cultural division so deep that most Jewish travelers would walk miles out of their way to avoid passing through Samaria at all. He speaks to her first. Give me a drink. She is startled enough to say exactly what she is thinking. How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? And what follows is the longest recorded one-on-one conversation Jesus has with anyone in the 4 Gospels. Longer than Nicodemus, longer than the rich young ruler, longer than Peter, with a Samaritan woman alone at a well at noon. He offers her living water. She pushes back. You don't even have a bucket. He tells her about the water that means no one will ever thirst again. She asks for it. He asks about her husband. She says she has no husband. He says, I know. You have had 5, and the one you are with now is not your husband. This is where you might expect her to run, or deflect, or shut down. But she doesn't. She leans in. Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. She is not broken by the exposure. She is curious. And that curiosity opens up a conversation about worship, about the Messiah, about the nature of God, a theological depth that Jesus rarely reaches with his own disciples. And when his disciples come back and find him talking to her, John records, they marveled. They said nothing, but they marveled. She runs back into the city and tells everyone, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? And many in that city believed. The woman who had been drawing water alone at noon, the one who did not want to be seen, became the first evangelist in Samaria because he stopped and talked and saw her completely. Now here is the one that stops people cold, because in this story, Jesus does not immediately stop. In fact, at first reading, it appears that Jesus says no. A Gentile woman, Matthew calls her a Canaanite, Mark says she is Syrophoenician, comes to Jesus in the region of Tyre and Sidon, which is outside Jewish territory entirely. Her daughter is severely afflicted by a demon. She has heard about Jesus, and she is desperate in the way that only a parent can be desperate. She cries out, have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon. And Jesus does not answer her. His disciples get uncomfortable and say, "Send her away, for she is crying out after us." Jesus speaks then, but what he says is hard. "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." She comes and kneels before him. "Lord, help me." And then Jesus says something that has troubled readers for 20 centuries. It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. This is one of the most debated passages in the Gospels. Some scholars argue Jesus was testing her faith. Some argue he was reflecting the common Jewish attitude of the day and was about to challenge it. Some argue the word he used, canarian in Greek, referred to small house dogs, not the street dogs used as an insult, and that there was warmth in his tone that text cannot transmit. But here is what is undeniable. She does not flinch. She answers him. This desperate Gentile mother argues with the Son of God, and she says, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." She took his metaphor and turned it, agreed with the framing, and then found a door inside it and walked through. Jesus responds with something he says to almost no one. "O woman, great is your faith." Not just faith, great faith, mega faith in the Greek, megao, the same word used for things that are enormous, monumental, beyond what you expect. "Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter is healed from that moment. She came from outside the covenant. She had no claim on him by ancestry or law or religion, and she refused to accept that as the final answer. She pressed in, persistent, humble, clever, and she found that there was room at the table she had been told she did not belong to. Here's the part nobody tells you. Jesus praised her out loud. He named her faith in public. And then he did what she asked. She is the only person in the Gospels who, in a sense, changes Jesus' direction in a conversation, not by demanding, by trusting, by believing there was enough. He stopped, even when stopping required a conversation she had to fight for. Now, we get to the one I told you about at the beginning, the one that no one else in history will ever have. Her name is Mary Magdalene, and she is standing outside an empty tomb in the dark before sunrise on the first day of the week. She had been there the day before, watching from a distance when they crucified him. She had been there when Joseph of Arimathea laid the body in the tomb. She had gone home for the Sabbath because she was faithful, even in grief. And she had come back before dawn with spices to finish what had been started. The stone is gone. She runs, tells Peter and John. They come, they look, they go home. And Mary stays. She is standing outside the tomb, weeping, and she bends to look inside. 2 angels in white are sitting where the body had been. "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she says, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." She turns around. There is a man standing behind her. She does not recognize him. She thinks he must be the gardener. "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" She says, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." She is going to carry the body of a grown man by herself in the dark if she has to. That is how much she loved him. And then Jesus says one word, "Mary." And she knows. John writes it in Aramaic, the language they actually spoke, Miriam. Her name, in her language, in his voice. The voice she had heard for years, the voice she had thought was gone forever. One word, and she knows. She turns and says, "Rabboni," teacher, in Aramaic. This is what I promised you. In a world where women could not legally testify in a Roman court, in a religious culture where the testimony of a woman was considered worth half that of a man, as Josephus himself recorded it. In a moment that would become the hinge of all of human history, the most important morning in 2,000 years of Christianity, the first person the risen Jesus speaks to is a woman. Not Peter, not John, not any of the 12 disciples who had been with him from the beginning. Mary Magdalene, a woman who had been delivered from 7 demons, a woman who had followed him across Galilee, a woman who had stayed when almost everyone else ran. And his first instruction on the other side of the resurrection is given to her. Go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Go, tell them. The first preacher of the resurrection was a woman that the world would not have called a witness. He stopped. He said her name, and he sent her to change everything. 6 women, 6 moments, 6 times Jesus stopped when the world kept moving. And if you trace the pattern, if you lay all 6 of these stories side by side, something emerges that you cannot unsee. None of them had the right credentials. The woman caught in adultery was an accusation, not a person in the eyes of the crowd. The bleeding woman had been ceremonially untouchable for 12 years. The widow of Nain was walking toward a future no one had asked her to choose. The woman at the well was hiding in plain sight at the wrong hour, in the wrong place, from the wrong people. The Syrophoenician woman was from the wrong ethnicity, the wrong religion, the wrong region. And Mary Magdalene, Mary, who had demons pulled out of her, was the kind of person whose testimony didn't count in court. Every single one of them was, by the standards of that world, the wrong person to stop for. And he stopped for every single one of them. Here's the first thing to take with you. Jesus did not love people in categories. He did not see a crowd and pick out the ones who had the cleanest record, the strongest claim, the most impressive resume. He saw people, specific, named, complicated, bleeding, grieving, hiding, arguing people, and he stopped. That means he sees you, not the version of you that you present or the version of you that others have decided you are. The real one, the one drawing water at noon because you don't want to be seen, the one reaching through a crowd and hoping nobody notices. He notices. Here's the second thing. These women did not wait for permission to approach him. They reached, they came forward, they argued, they stayed past the point when everyone else left. Faith in every one of these stories looked like movement toward him even when the conditions were not right, even when the crowd was in the way, even when the law said stay back, even when the answer initially sounded like no. You do not need perfect circumstances to reach for him. You just need to reach. And here's the third thing, the one I want you to sit with. In the most important moment in the history of the world, Jesus chose to say a woman's name first, not because he was making a political statement, not because he was building a doctrine, because she was there. She had stayed. She had come back in the dark with spices and a broken heart and nowhere else to go. And he knew her name, her real name, in her real language. And he said it. He will say yours too. If this story moved something in you today, if you found yourself in one of these 6 women, whether you are the one who has been bleeding in secret, or the one hiding at noon, or the one who stayed past the moment when hope made sense, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. They're out there. You probably already know who they are. And if you want to go deeper, we have more stories like this one waiting for you right here on this channel. He always stopped. He always will.